Cassius Clay had returned from Chicago. He was 17 years old. His body had grown 2 inches since spring, but his hands had grown faster. They hung longer at his sides now, loose and ready, the knuckles slightly thicker from the wraps and the work. When he moved through the doorway into the training room, the afternoon light caught his face at an angle that made him look both younger and older at once. Joe Martin was taping up another fighter near the speed bag. He didn't look up right away, but he knew Cassius was there. Everyone did. Chicago had done something to him that no one could quite name. The trip had lasted only 4 days, but it might as well have been 4 months. He had fought in the National Golden Gloves tournament, a sea of talent from cities bigger and louder than Louisville. He had won his division. But winning wasn't what changed him. It was the size of the arena. The roar of strangers who didn't know his name. The realization that beyond the hills of Kentucky, there existed an entire world of fighters, coaches, scouts, and spectators who moved through boxing like it was something larger than a hobby or a way to stay off the streets. It was a system, a ladder, and for the first time, Cassius understood that he might be able to climb it. Louisville now felt different to him. Smaller, yes, but also safer. Too safe. He no longer walked into the gym with the energy of a boy trying to prove himself to the neighborhood. He walked in with the focus of someone who had tasted something beyond the neighborhood and found that it fit him. His mother noticed it first. The way he came home quiet after training. The way he sat at the dinner table and stared at his plate without really seeing it. She asked him once if something was wrong. He told her no. But his eyes were somewhere else. His father noticed too. He grew louder around Cassius, as if volume could pull him back into the present. It didn't work. Cassius was polite, respectful, but distant. He had seen the door. And now he couldn't stop thinking about what was on the other side. Joe Martin increased the training load without saying why. Longer sessions, stricter schedules, conditioning runs before dawn that left Cassius gasping in the cold air, his breath rising in clouds under the streetlights. Shadowboxing drills until his arms burned and his legs shook. Footwork patterns traced over and over on the scuffed canvas until muscle memory replaced thought. Martin didn't explain the change. He didn't need to. He had seen this moment before in other fighters. The moment when potential stops being a dream and starts becoming a demand. The moment when a boy realizes that his gift will either define him or haunt him, and there is no third option. Cassius never complained. He showed up early. He stayed late. He wrapped his own hands now, the movements automatic, precise. He had begun treating his body differently, not as something to use, but as something to sharpen. A tool. An instrument. He drank water between rounds the way a mechanic oils a machine. He studied his reflection in the mirrored wall, not out of vanity, but calculation, where his elbows dropped, where his chin lifted, where his balance wavered for half a second during a pivot. Other trainers started watching him. They would lean against the doorframe when he sparred, arms folded, eyes tracking his movement. A few of them asked Martin questions in low voices afterward. Who was the kid? How long had he been training? Was he committed? Martin's answers were short, protective, but the attention was real. Word traveled quietly through amateur boxing circuits the way it always does. A name began appearing in local rankings. Cassius Clay. Louisville. Light heavyweight. Promising. The opponents who faced him now came prepared. They had heard something. They entered the ring with tighter guards, sharper jabs, less willingness to test him early. The fights became harder, closer, more technical. Cassius won most of them, but the victories no longer felt like surprises. They felt like work. And the losses, the few that came, stung differently now. Before Chicago, a loss had been embarrassing. After Chicago, a loss felt like falling backward down a ladder he was trying to climb. He hated that feeling. It made him train harder. But something else was happening too, something quieter. He was changing the way he carried himself outside the ring. His posture straightened when he walked down the street. His eye contact held longer when someone spoke to him. He smiled more before fights, not out of nervousness, but confidence. A calm, almost serene expression that unnerved some of his opponents more than trash talk ever could. He wasn't loud yet. He wasn't the man the world would later know. But the seeds of that presence were beginning to sprout. A kind of self-assurance that didn't need volume. His family felt the shift differently. His father grew more demanding. He talked about Cassius's future as if it were already decided, as if Olympic gold and professional fame were certainties rather than possibilities. He spoke louder at family gatherings, pointing to his son with pride that sometimes felt more like ownership. Cassius listened without arguing, but something in him tightened when his father spoke that way, as if the future his father described was already too small. His mother grew quieter, more protective. She watched him with worry that she tried to hide behind small gestures, packing extra food in his training bag, asking him to be careful when he left for the gym, touching his shoulder when he passed her in the hallway, as if to remind herself he was still there. She didn't say it, but Cassius could feel her fear. The fear that boxing would take him somewhere she couldn't follow. That the world outside Louisville would pull him away and never give him back. Cassius felt the tension between their hopes and their fears. He felt it pressing on him from both sides. His father's pride, his mother's worry, the weight of being their son, and also something more. If he failed now, he wouldn't just fail himself. He would fail everyone who believed in him, and everyone who feared for him. It sharpened both his fear and his motivation. Then, in the winter of 1959, a word began to circulate. Olympics. It appeared first in passing conversations. A coach mentioning trials, a newspaper article about amateur rankings, a radio broadcast listing upcoming national youth championships. Cassius heard the word in fragments, scattered across weeks, but each time it landed in his mind with more weight. The Olympics. Rome, 1960. The global stage. Athletes from every nation. Cameras. Flags. Anthems. A chance to represent not just Louisville, but the entire country. It sounded impossible. Too big. Too distant. Almost unreal. Like something that happened to other people in other cities with other kinds of talent. But the word stayed with him. It settled into his thoughts the way silt settles into riverbed. Quietly. Slowly. Becoming part of the foundation. He didn't speak about it. Not to his parents. Not to Joe Martin. Not to anyone. But when he ran his early morning miles through the empty streets of Louisville, he imagined what it might feel like to stand in a stadium filled with thousands of strangers, all of them watching him. The thought terrified him, but it also made him run faster. America. In 1959 felt different than it had even a year before. The air was charged with something Cassius couldn't quite name. Civil rights pressure was rising. Sit-ins were beginning in the South. Court cases were being fought over integration. Young black athletes were becoming symbols whether they wanted to be or not. Cassius felt the shift in small ways. The way white spectators watched him differently at tournaments now. The way some black spectators cheered louder when he entered the ring, as if his victory meant more than just a personal win. He began to realize that winning wasn't just personal anymore. It never had been, really. But now the understanding was conscious, clear. Every time he stepped into the ring, he carried more than just his own name. He carried the hopes and expectations of people who saw themselves in him. People who needed to believe that talent and hard work could overcome the barriers that the world placed in front of them. It was a heavy thing to carry. Some days it made him feel strong. Other days it made him feel small. But he kept training. Because deep down, beneath the pressure and the fear and the uncertainty, there was something else. A belief. A knowing. That he was meant for something more than Louisville. That the path he was on, as hard and unclear as it sometimes felt, was leading him somewhere that mattered. He didn't know where yet. He couldn't see the end. But he could see the next step. And that was enough. Joe Martin watched all of this happen without saying much. He had trained hundreds of boys over the years. Most of them were good. A few were great. But Cassius was different. Not because of his talent, though that was undeniable, but because of the way he approached it. The hunger, the discipline, the willingness to endure discomfort without complaint. Martin had seen fighters with more natural power, fighters with better defense, but he had never seen anyone move the way Cassius moved. And more than that, Martin saw the mind, the way Cassius studied film of other fighters, the way he asked questions that most 17-year-olds wouldn't think to ask, the way he adjusted mid-fight, reading opponents like they were open books. Martin knew that talent without intelligence was just potential, and intelligence without discipline was just theory. But when all three came together in one person, something rare happened. Martin started making phone calls, quiet ones, to people he knew in the amateur boxing world, asking about upcoming tournaments, national rankings, what it would take to get Cassius noticed by the Olympic Selection Committee. He didn't tell Cassius about these calls. Not yet. But he was laying groundwork, building a path. Because he knew that boys like Cassius didn't come along often. Winter turned to spring. Spring turned to summer. Cassius kept training. The gym became his second home. The rhythm of the speed bag, the thud of gloves against leather, the scrape of feet on canvas. These sounds became the soundtrack of his life. He measured time not in days or weeks, but in rounds. In miles run. In pounds of sweat lost and regained. His body changed again. Leaner, harder, faster. He no longer trained to be better than yesterday. He trained to become someone tomorrow. Someone he could only half imagine, but fully believed in. A champion. A name that people would remember. A fighter who didn't just win, but mattered. He didn't know yet how far that road would take him. He didn't know about Rome, about gold, about the world that waited beyond 1960. But he knew he was on the right path. He could feel it in his bones. And on the quiet nights when he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of his small room in Louisville, listening to the sounds of his neighborhood settling into sleep, he allowed himself to dream. Not wild dreams, not impossible fantasies, but real, tangible visions of what might happen if he kept going. He dreamed of standing in a ring somewhere far from home, his hand raised in victory, the crowd roaring his name. He dreamed of making his mother smile without worry. He dreamed of proving to his father that the pride was earned, not assumed. He dreamed of becoming someone that Louisville could point to and say, "We knew him when." But most of all, he dreamed of proving to himself that the voice inside his head, the one that whispered, "You're meant for more," was telling the truth. Because after Chicago, Cassius Clay understood something that would shape the rest of his life. Talent was a gift, but what you did with it was a choice. And he had made his choice. He would not waste it. He would not settle. He would chase the dream until it became real, or until it broke him trying. The road to the Olympics had begun. He just didn't know it yet. But the world would soon find out. And when they did, nothing would ever be the same again.